Chief Financial Officer of Actlabs. We're a Canadian-based multinational providing laboratory services to a wide variety of industries with a focus on the mining industry. How efficient is digital transformation and process automation for Actlabs? As a service company that is very labor-heavy, our primary driver for digital transformation is improving labor efficiency in the wake of the labor shortages that are only projected to worsen throughout this next decade. Process automation via robotics, custom automation, and robotic process automation, RPA, are key areas that we have been investing in. Digital transformation is more on the periphery of improving labor efficiency, but is also an area that is getting some attention. Question: what are your corporate objectives for digitization and adoption of RPA? While some start with simple use cases, when we looked at the cost of an RPA platform compared to point-to-point automation solutions, the ROI for us was starting with a more complex use case that would impact more individuals and save the most amount of labor time in aggregate. From there, we then plan to look to expand the use of bots to any other robotic-type manual labor practices performed on computers. Next question. In your opinion, what values could you bring to your organization by networking and building partnerships by participating in this event? We are very new to the world of digital transformation and process automation. My perspective is that the more time that can be spent with industry veterans, the quicker we can get up to speed and get the greatest benefit from the technology and avoid the pitfalls of learning. Lastly, a greeting message for the success of the event. Hopefully, I will be in attendance and be able to chat and learn from the other attendees. Wishing everyone a great and successful Technology Summit.